Someone scrolls through their feed in silence. Faces pass by like windows, friends at dinners, co-workers on vacations, strangers smiling into lenses that promise connection. Their thumb pauses over the add photo button, a picture ready to be shared, then stops. The phone locks, the world moves on. Many of us know that feeling, that quiet pull between wanting to be seen and wanting to stay untouched. The hesitation before exposure, the whisper that says, maybe not today. It's not apathy, it's something subtler, a kind of boundary the world can't quite name. What lives inside that silence? Fear of being judged or freedom from needing to be? In a digital culture built on self-display, choosing not to post can feel almost radical. Social media rewards visibility, likes, comments, shares, the currency of being noticed. Yet for some, that constant display begins to feel like erosion. Every post chips away at something private, something sacred. Psychologically, it touches on a deep tension. The need for belonging versus the need for autonomy. Humans are wired to connect, to be recognized, to exist in the eyes of others, but we're also wired to protect the fragile sense of self that forms when no one's watching. When the audience becomes constant, the self can start to dissolve. That's when withdrawal begins, not out of arrogance or disinterest, but as an instinct to preserve identity. Someone who doesn't post isn't necessarily disconnected. They're often deeply aware of how connection works and what it costs. A photo on social media isn't just a record of reality, it's an edited version of selfhood. Every caption, filter, and crop becomes a negotiation. What part of me should exist for others to see? The more this negotiation repeats, the more a subtle fatigue sets in. People start to feel like curators of their own existence. So when someone stops posting, they're not disappearing. They're stepping out of the performance. They begin to live moments that don't need proof. They eat the meal without photographing it, walk through a sunset without thinking about angles, laugh without thinking how it'll look on camera. And in that silence, something profound happens. The reward system resets. Neuroscientists talk about dopamine loops, the little chemical surges that drive our need for engagement. Every like, every heart, every view reinforces a behavior. But when those loops break, when someone stops posting, the brain slowly relearns what satisfaction feels like without witnesses. The pleasure shifts from being seen to being present. It's not rejection of the digital world, it's recovery from it. Because beneath the quiet is a deeper question. Who are we when no one is watching? Someone who doesn't post lives in a different rhythm, one that moves slower, deeper, more inward. Their life still unfolds like anyone else's, but its meaning isn't constantly translated into an image. That absence of translation changes everything. Psychologists call this shift intrinsic orientation, when people act from internal values rather than external rewards. In simpler terms, they do things for the thing itself. A walk feels good because it clears the mind, not because it's photogenic. A meal tastes better when it doesn't have to perform. This orientation protects the psyche from fragmentation. Because every time we post, we split ourselves in two, the one who lives the moment and the one who frames it. Over time, that split can become exhausting. The inner self becomes an editor, constantly reviewing what's shareable, what's likable, what's safe. Someone who resists that process might not articulate why, they just feel lighter when they step back. Their sense of self becomes less projected and more lived. They may still scroll, still observe, but they do so as travelers, not performers. Yet not posting can also hide something softer, a fear of misinterpretation. Many people who stay quiet online aren't trying to be mysterious. They simply know how easily the internet flattens complexity. A photo of joy might be read as arrogance, a post of sadness as attention-seeking. Silence becomes the safest form of honesty, a way of saying, you can't misunderstand what I don't show. There's also the intimacy paradox. The more we share publicly, the more we can lose privately. When life becomes content, relationships subtly change. People stop asking questions because the answers are already online. Moments lose their weight because they've already been witnessed. Someone who doesn't post preserves that small, human space where things still belong to them alone. And yet, even this silence isn't pure detachment. It's social communication in disguise. In digital culture, not posting is its own signal, a statement of independence, sometimes of subtle resistance. It says, I exist outside your feed. Sociologists describe this as symbolic absence, when what's not shown speaks louder than what is. The blank profile picture, the empty feed, the quiet account, all become modern symbols of privacy, control, even quiet confidence. But deeper than that, this silence often hides longing. Because even those who don't post still want to be understood. They just hope understanding might come without exposure, that someone might know them not through images, but through presence, through conversation, through the subtle ways real connection unfolds. And maybe that's what this all points to, a search for meaningful visibility, the kind that doesn't need a photo to exist. There's a kind of peace that comes from being unphotographed. A moment that exists only in memory doesn't have to prove its worth. It doesn't need validation. It simply is. Someone who doesn't post often rediscovers this quiet form of existence. Their life becomes more about experience retention than image preservation. Psychologists might frame this as experiential authenticity, the alignment between what one feels and what one lives, unmediated by performance. It's when the moment itself, not its representation, becomes enough. But this authenticity doesn't always come easily. It's often born from fatigue, from years of subtle comparison, from the endless pressure to appear content, beautiful, productive. The person who steps away has usually played the game long enough to see its cost. They've felt the hollow joy of approval, the strange emptiness that follows validation. It's not that they reject attention, it's that they've learned how fragile it is. There's a term in psychology called the looking glass self, coined by Charles Cooley. It suggests that we form our identities by seeing ourselves reflected in how others perceive us. Social media amplifies that mirror 1,000-fold. Everyone becomes a reflection. Every reaction a fragment of who we think we are. When someone stops posting, they're not escaping the mirror entirely. They're simply turning away from the distorted ones. They start rebuilding identity from within, piece by piece, until their sense of self no longer needs to be mirrored to exist. But the modern mind rarely leaves unobserved space untouched. Even in absence, there's awareness of audience. Someone who doesn't post still knows they could. That silent potential, to be seen but choosing not to, gives their invisibility meaning. It's not erasure, it's selective existence. Think of it like walking through a crowded room while invisible. You still feel the buzz of attention, the pull of eyes you've decided not to meet. There's power in that choice, a quiet kind of authorship. And that's what many non-posters are really doing, authoring their own invisibility. They choose when to be known and when to retreat, when to reveal and when to remain undefined. It's not self-erasure, it's self-curation without display. This choice aligns with a deeper psychological need, control over narrative. When every post becomes a story others interpret, silence becomes the only story that stays fully yours. But control isn't the whole picture. Beneath it lies a more delicate emotion, something almost sacred. The sense that some parts of life lose meaning the moment they're shared. That wonder, joy, and love are sometimes too fragile for exposure. For someone who doesn't post, the truest moments aren't the ones captured, they're the ones kept. There's a quiet truth people rarely say out loud. Being unseen can feel like breathing again. When the need to prove or present fades, the body itself relaxes. Shoulders drop. The inner commentary, how do I look? How does this come across? Will they care? Finally quiets. What replaces it isn't loneliness, but a strange form of groundedness. Psychologists sometimes call this self-presence, a state where awareness turns inward rather than outward. It's not self-absorption, but self-reunion. The mind stops reaching for external mirrors and begins noticing the subtleties of its own experience, the rhythm of breathing, the taste of silence, the small relief of being nobody for a while. But self-presence in the digital era feels countercultural. We live in what researchers describe as a performative society, where expression isn't just encouraged, it's expected. Silence reads as withholding. Privacy can even look suspicious. The collective rhythm moves toward exposure, and anyone who steps off beat risks being mistaken for detached or strange. Yet, paradoxically, those who withdraw often end up with the clearest perspective on what the performance costs, because stepping back from visibility reveals just how transactional online interaction can be. A photo that once meant "this is my life" begins to look like "this is how I'd like my life to appear." The difference, though subtle, reshapes the entire relationship between the self and the world. Someone who doesn't post begins to see that difference everywhere. They notice how people talk differently when there's a camera out, how laughter sharpens when it's recorded, how even grief starts performing for sympathy. And they quietly ask themselves, when did expression stop being for meaning and start being for metrics? This awareness often deepens into empathy. They stop judging others for posting, realizing it's not vanity, it's hunger. The human need to be witnessed, to feel like what we're living matters to someone else. It's a deeply biological drive anchored in oxytocin and dopamine, shaped by evolution itself. But what they've learned is that digital witnessing is not the same as being seen. To be witnessed online is to be observed through fragments. To be seen in real life is to be known through presence, tone, silence, context, memory. The former gives recognition, the latter gives meaning, and that's what someone who doesn't post often chases, not attention, but depth. They don't reject the gaze of others entirely, they just prefer it to come from eyes that truly notice, rather than screens that quickly scroll past. Their silence is not an absence of expression, but a shift in language, from visual to emotional, from public to private. They're not hiding from the world. They're simply choosing which parts of themselves the world gets to keep. There's another layer beneath all of this, something almost philosophical. Silence online is not just about privacy or peace, it's about ownership of meaning. When someone posts a photo, it no longer fully belongs to them. It enters a shared interpretive space where every viewer creates their own version of that moment. A smile might look like confidence to one person, loneliness to another. A vacation might read as joy or as performance. In that exchange, a subtle distortion occurs. The meaning of the moment is no longer yours. Someone who doesn't post is aware of that loss, not always consciously, but intuitively. They've felt the way personal experiences thin out when exposed to too many eyes. A memory that once glowed internally becomes flattened, simplified into likes and captions. What was alive turns static. This connects deeply to a psychological idea known as self-determination theory, which describes our three basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Posting often fulfills relatedness, the need to feel connected. But it can quietly erode autonomy, the sense that I control my choices, my identity, my story. Someone who doesn't post often guards that autonomy fiercely. Their silence is a way of saying, my story is not a public domain, but there's something else, something more tender. Many of these people still capture moments. They still take photos, still write thoughts, still collect fragments of life, but they keep them private. A hidden archive of meaning no one else will ever see. This isn't secrecy, it's intimacy, a relationship with the self that doesn't need witnesses. There's a calm that comes from knowing some memories live nowhere but inside you. In psychology, this can nurture internal validation, the quiet sense that something is valuable simply because you experienced it. No audience required. But not posting isn't always born from peace. Sometimes it's born from the opposite, from overexposure fatigue. After years of being online, people begin to feel fragmented, versions of themselves scattered across timelines. Each platform demands a different identity: the professional self, the playful self, the thoughtful self. The weight of maintaining all of them becomes heavy. Silence then becomes a kind of psychological reintegration, a chance to gather all those fragments and bring them home. And once that integration begins, something curious happens. They start to see that life without posting isn't smaller, it's denser. Moments last longer, memories feel fuller, emotions have space to echo before being shared. It's not that they stop caring what others think, they just stop needing it to define them. They discover the rare satisfaction of being known deeply by a few instead of superficially by many. And in an age of endless exposure, that might be the most radical form of connection left. There's an interesting psychological irony in all of this. When someone doesn't post, they often become more real to the people who actually know them, and less visible to those who don't. In a culture where presence is measured by visibility, their absence can feel confusing, but that absence isn't emptiness. It's a different way of existing, quieter but more deliberate. We could think of it as digital minimalism of the self. Just as some people declutter their homes to regain mental space, others declutter their identities online. They remove the noise, the need to constantly update, the subtle competition for attention. What's left is something lighter, a self that doesn't need to be documented to be real. From a psychological lens, this mirrors the idea of cognitive load, the mental effort used to manage information. Social media doesn't just show us others, it constantly reminds us that we too are being seen. That awareness takes up space in the mind. Every post adds a thread of self-monitoring, a quiet background process running endlessly. When someone stops posting, that background noise fades. Their thoughts start belonging to them again. Many describe feeling more focused, more observant, even more alive. The world becomes less of a stage and more of a landscape. But the shift isn't just cognitive, it's emotional. Something changes in the way they experience solitude. What once felt like disconnection begins to feel like presence. The moments alone stop feeling like gaps between interactions and start feeling like the texture of life itself. There's a theory in existential psychology that says modern loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being unseen superficially. The more we show ourselves in shallow ways, the harder it becomes to feel deeply known. So someone who doesn't post isn't always retreating from people. They're retreating from performative loneliness. They'd rather be unseen honestly than half-seen constantly. Still, silence can be misunderstood. People might assume detachment, superiority, or lack of engagement, but beneath it, there's often something humble, a recognition that visibility can't capture truth. They know that real connection can't be measured in reach or reactions. And maybe that's the quiet realization at the heart of all this, that being unseen isn't the same as being invisible. It's simply choosing to be visible only where it matters. Someone who doesn't post hasn't vanished. They're still here, just living at a depth the algorithm can't detect. Because the truest moments don't need witnesses, they only need to be lived.